Il est 9 heures, nous sommes le 15 mai et j'ai le plaisir d'ouvrir notre dernière session de cette petite île. C'est la session qui est celle où nous écouterons Anna Julia Gramenzi de l'Université de Bologne nous parler de Inventing the Female Anatomy in the 16th Century. As you know, before we start, I want to thank you all and thank Saint Ginette of the Zoom and Saint Emmanuel of the interpretations for their presence and their support. I would also like to acknowledge with respect the Lekwungen peoples on whose traditional territory the university stands, and the Songhees, Esquimalt and Saanich peoples, whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. Dans ma traduction, avec respect, nous remercions le peuple Lekwungen qui accueille l'Université de Victoria sur ses territoires traditionnels, ainsi que les nations Esquimalt et Songhees, dont les longues relations avec ce lieu n'ont pas cessé. Avec beaucoup de respect et aussi de gratitude, car, comme vous l'avez compris, nous habitons au paradis. Mais sans plus attendre, j'ouvre la session qui est consacrée à la conférence d'Anna Julia Gramenzi, que je remercie infiniment d'être venue. Anna Julia Gramenzi est un vrai docteur, enfin une vraie docteure, puisqu'elle est docteur en médecine et elle enseigne la médecine à l'Université de Bologne. Elle est aussi historienne de la médecine et je l'ai rencontrée car elle a publié et traduit les textes de Giovanni Marinello, ce médecin merveilleux du XVIe siècle italien, dont la fille Lucrezia Marinella est l'auteur d'un traité sur la noblesse et l'excellence des femmes. Comme vous vous rappelez, le médecin français Charles Étienne a une fille, Nicole Étienne, qui est aussi une écrivaine féministe. Et le gendre de Charles Étienne et le mari de Nicole Étienne traduit Marinello. Donc, d'une certaine façon, je suis la commère d'Anna Giulia Gramenzi via Giovanni Marinello et Charles Étienne. Et Anna Giulia, je te remercie immensément d'être là. Tu seras bien mieux présentée par Annalie Lepp, qui est la doyenne bien aimée pour l'instant et que nous voulons pour toujours de la faculté des humanités à l'Université de Victoria. Annalie Lepp a longtemps été la directrice du département de Women's Studies à la faculté des humanités, puis celle du département de Gender Studies lorsque Women's Studies est devenu Gender Studies. Je suis extrêmement reconnaissante à Annalie qu'elle prenne un samedi matin pour être avec nous. C'est le moment où les profs de l'Université de Victoria croyaient qu'ils seraient en vacances, mais ils ne le sont pas. Ils doivent répondre à des sondages, participer à des réunions, et en fait, c'est un moment très occupé et je l'en suis d'autant plus reconnaissante. Annalie.
Thank you so much, Alain. So you have introduced me. I am a professor in gender studies here at University of Victoria, and I'm currently the acting dean of the humanities. And I also wanted to acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territories of the Lekwungen peoples and the Songhees, Esquimalt, and WiSanish peoples who continue to have deep relationships with this land. And I think the acknowledgement of the Indigenous territories is very important to both register the harms of settler colonialism, both past and present, as well as the urgent need to continue the projects of truth, reconciliation, anti-racism, and decolonization at the university and beyond. So it's a very great pleasure to introduce our very eminent speaker, Dr. Anna Julia Gramenzi. Dr. Gramenzi is a physician in Bologna and an assistant professor in internal medicine at the Department of Medical and Surgical Science at the University of Bologna. Since 2007-2008, she's been teaching the history of medicine at the School of Medicine and Surgery at the university. Her areas of interest include clinical epidemiology and hepatology, I hope I pronounced that correctly, as well as the history of women in medicine, both as patients and also as healers in the modern age, as well as the construction and representation of female and monstrous bodies. Since 2020, she has also been a member of an internal research project that focuses on male voices in women's complaint. She's the co-author of more than 100 publications, not sure how you do it, as well as practicing medicine and teaching, including those that focus on the field of the history of medicine. The title of her lecture today is Inventing the Female Anatomy in the 16th Century, Dissections and Interpretations of the Uterus. As a trained gender historian, I'm really looking forward to this talk. I unfortunately have to leave at 10 to meet with a graduate student, but I'm looking forward to the talk. And please join me in extending a warm virtual welcome to Dr. Grimanzi. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Annalie, for your wonderful presentation. And thank you so much, Hélène, for organizing this meeting. Thank you for inviting me. It is an honor for me to have had the opportunity to participate and to listen to the first session full of interesting suggestions and the exciting lectures of Professor King and Professor Woods. And it is an honor for me to be here today. Many thanks also to Anthony and to Ginette and Emmanuel for the translation of my Italianized English. So I try to share my screen. Is it okay? Okay. So speaking of Hélène, je ne t'entends pas.
Thank you very much for being there, Anna Julia. Thank you, Annalie. I remind everyone that by clicking on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen, you can hear Anna Julia Grimanzi with the voice of Emmanuel Eric and Ginette Miranda. And I thank very much Anna Julia for being there when she's so busy as a real doctor. And I also thank Emmanuel and Ginette for being there and being our voices and screens. Sorry.
Okay, so speaking of female genitalia, the nomenclature has always been a concern, as Professor Woods pointed out yesterday. The standardization of medical nomenclature is an ongoing process. Just think about the recent COVID pandemic. And the choice of medical terms has never been a random operation, since it still reflects the cultural and ideological approach of the writer or speaker, and deeply marks differences between academic, trained professionals, and lay people. During the Renaissance, the dissection of corpses created a somewhat problematic semantic remapping of the human body terms, magnified by the printing press's ability to broadcast ideas and images to wider audiences. 16th century medicine presents ample evidence of a strong and plural interest for women as corpses to be dissected, as patients affected by morbi muliebres, generically women ailments, as audience of obstetrical writings addressed to honest and pious women and literate midwives. Some texts originally written in the scientific Latin were translated into vernacular and vice versa. Therefore, terms such as womb, mother, matrix, and uterus acquire new meanings, new symbolisms, metaphors, and reference, as well as ambiguity and allusions. For Erasmus, womb and vulva, referred as the passage to the womb, were prudent words. However, the ignorant consider them disgusting, so Erasmus offers a woman's nature as a less offensive alternative. In Rodion's French translation of the extremely popular German midwife manual called Rosengarten, such terms as partie génitale and génitoire de la femme replaced the term partie honteuse, shameful parts. As an anecdote, even today in Italy, some of my old patients refer to their genitals in terms of shame, the shame, la vergogna, or parti gentili, kind or polite parts. And this is a common among my old patients at the hospital. Sorry, I have some problem with my screen. Okay. So this, as you can see, even though Thomas Reynoldi thinks that words such as mother or matrix or womb are interchangeable, indeed, womb and mother were often employed in popular medical works, whereas matrix and uterus were conventionally used in academic books to precisely isolate the female generative organs. Importantly, these organs are not exactly the same we intend today. Indeed, most of the terms medical rights employed for uterus as well as for vulva and vagina were not comparable to the modern terms as we saw yesterday. In any case, at least in English early modern medical literature, among the terms used to denote the female organ that houses the fetus, the vernacular and the most evocative of the mother's body, that is the womb, appears only in the context of denying any connection between it and the fetus. The fetus exists in utero, but has no connection with the womb. As you can see in the images illustrating the various positions of a fetus in 16th century midwife manuals, one can only assume that the space in which the fetus floats, a sort of balloon or light bulb or broken upside down vase, is a womb. Occasionally, as in Jacob Rueff, the Conceptu and Generatione Hominis on the left, or in the Comare or Ricoglitrice of Scipione Mercurio on the right, published in 1596, the figures were presented with umbilical cords. But even in these cases, they appear to be fully dissociated from the materiality of the mother's body. I have to point out that comare means midwife, and ricoglitrice can be translated as harvester, to stay in the metaphors. And as you can see, these illustrations are very close to medieval pictures. They subjectify the fetus as an autonomous entity by silencing the mother. I am not talking of pregnant uterus today, but I will try to offer some insight into male, medical, and beyond exploitation of the womb in 16th century, starting from the quote, tota mulier in utero. For medicine, indeed, the female body has long been considered to contain numerous secrets, and the womb was the secret of the secrets. According to humoral theory, women with their cool, wet bodies were particularly vulnerable to fluid imbalances, and their womb was the organ most at risk and definitely the source of all their health problems. At least 600 miseries and innumerable calamities, as Lazare Riviere stated in the mid-17th century. All these miseries and calamities, as well as the curiosities and the male fantasies, likely motivated the Renaissance physicians' interest, since they were concerned for female patients and moved by genuine compassion for their suffering. The 16th century French barber surgeon and obstetrician Ambroise Paré referred to the womb as Amari, which translates as a thing filled with sorrow. Thus, it was not by chance that women were subject to more diseases than men. I quote the words of the physician and chemist Edward Jordan, the author of the first English work on hysteria, published in 1603. Jordan wrote this book after his testimony at the trial of Elizabeth Jackson, who was accused of bewitching Mary Glover in 1602. Jordan tried, unsuccessfully, to argue that Jackson was not possessed by a supernatural power, but was the victim of her own body, since she was suffering from a natural disease that he called passio hysterica, or the suffocation of the mother. And you see the word mother is used here to mean womb or uterus. The womb is an organ without a fixed completion. It was an unreliable, perishable, ambivalent, independent, and ultra-sensitive organ, as well as an indwelling, difficult, and irritable animal, requiring constant attention, surveillance, and control. It was in turn an animal within an animal, for Plato, a monster, a word unto itself, according to Simon Forman, the Elizabeth astrological physician specialized in women's health. According to Forman, it was particularly difficult to treat women because their health depended on the state of their wombs, on their sexual activity, subjects about which women were notoriously duplicitous. It is not surprising that the uterus has been depicted as zoomorphic or with animalistic words. Reading passages from the first printed Italian obstetric manuals written in vernacular by Scipione Mercurio, as we already saw, and Giovanni Marinello in the late 16th century, the matrix is described as a wild beast, fiera indomabile in Italian, and using words such as mouth, snout of tench, tench is a fish, neck, lips, crest, nymphs, and some of these terms are still in use. I quote a passage from Scipione Mercurio, La comare o ricoglitrice. Scipione Mercurio was indeed wandering like the womb. Indeed, he was a pupil of Giulio Cesare Aranzio in Bologna, and his life fluctuated between theology and medicine, and between Bologna, Padua, and France. His book, indeed a little amazing in comparison to the book of Giovanni Marinello, is the first textbook for Italian midwives, and was very successful, more than the text of Marinello. It ran to no less than 17 editions, the last being as late as 1713. I apologize that the translation of this passage is mine. Mercurio, as well as Marinello, uses the term matrix, matrice in Italia. And as you can see, there are terms such as neck, crest, and nymph stands for hymen, the sign of virginity. Scipione Mercurio does not say anything new. Sorry. For him, as we heard yesterday, the matrix is divided into two parts, the neck and the fundus or cavity. The neck starts from the nature and ends in the mouth of the matrix. And the womb has two horns like a wheel. The difference between the neck and the fundus is that the neck, according to Scipione Mercurio, is made of a spongy matter. And in women, as well as in men, this spongy neck is able to swell in case of venous appetites, that is, sexual desire. Vagina and womb, as we well know, were seen as a single organ, that is, womb with neck. And in Vesalius' famous figure 27, these are also joined to the external genitalia. So, even if we see it that way, this is not a vagina as penis, as Professor King told us. As the label makes clear for a 16th century audience, this is the womb and its constituent parts. Like a living thing or creature, the womb was believed to be endowed with powerful sensory faculties, such as smell, sensitivity to heat and cold, appetite, gluttony for hot, moist male seed, and a disturbing capacity for movement. According to the Montpellier physician André Dulaurent, the uterus was ablaze, hidden under the warm ashes. Effectively, from the matrix, fumes, windiness, spirits, vapors develop, as you can see in this figure, contained in the earliest anatomic illustrations in a printed book. I refer to Johannes Kettam, Fasciculus Medicinae, a sort of booklet of 6 independent and quite different medieval medical texts printed in Latin in 1494. As you can see, the lower extremities of this woman figure are spread to expose the reproductive anatomy, and from the matrix, fan-shaped lines come out, clustered by the caption, fumes of the matrix, fumosità della matrice. And fumigation, as Hélène told her, remember us, placing an herbal pessary at the neck of the womb was one of the most common remedy for mal de matrice, ailment of the matrix. Herbal pessaries or suppositories were shaped like pears, apples, pomegranates, or even the phallus, as you can see, and attempted to purge excess humors by releasing herbal vapors into the womb. This figure from 1559 shows a practitioner placing a pomegranate-shaped pessary inside a woman with a prolapsed uterus. Even if early modern medical writers firmly desired to assert and reassert men's centrality to reproduction, they frequently described the womb in terms of activity. It desired, attract, mixed and mingled seed, nurturing it into a fetus. There is no lack of explicit quotation, as you can see. Various texts mentioned that the womb snatched a man's seed after ejaculation and shut itself tight to prevent any loss. It was equipped with a sort of magnetic, sympathetic capabilities, able to lure male seed for procreative purpose. As you can see, the description of Etienne de la Rivière, the same Vesalius, and Ambroise Paré. Even when Eyewitness accounts of dissections noted and established that the womb was indeed well fixed in the pelvis. It was not wandering. One of the first descriptions was that of Nicola Massa, anatomist in Padua in 1536. Indeed, the womb continued in some way to wander with evil intent when unfulfilled, interfering with the other female organs' function for a long time. It was explained that this peculiar sensation also resulted from the womb's superficial similarity to the brain. And by the end of 17th century, some doctors tried to explain this condition. If you think the meninges are called mothers, Pia mother and dura madre in Italian. It is worth noting that yet at the end of 18th century, Petronio Ignazio Zacchini, a professor of philosophy and medicine at my university in Bologna, accused the uterus of usurping no less than the intellectual activity of the brain. In short, women think with the uterus, but that is another story. Alessandro Benedetti, humanist and anatomist in Padua, where he built the first anatomic theater, the Montable, described the uterine interior as a secluded garden, wherein sprout seed leaves, acetabula or cotyledons, fertilizing the female humor. The cotyledons uterus, indeed, was refuted by Giulio Aranzi, the Grand Master of Scipione Mercurio in 1564. But this analogy is presented in the 17th century, both as verbal metaphor by Johannes Veslingus in Padua, doctor and botanical, describing the fruit enclosed in its secundines, and also as visual metaphor in one of the copper plates of Adrian van der Spiegel's De Formato Fetu, published in 1627. This wonderful image is also the result of the mentor and grandmaster of the Spiegel, the outstanding anatomist in Padua, Julius Casserius. A sleeping, fully developed fetus is shown attached via the umbilical cord to the placenta, surrounding which, like petals, are the dissected parts of the membranes of the uterus. The fetus lies in the center of this array as though emerging from a flower, as indeed fruit does. Due to its location in the body and the physician's difficulty in accessing the organ, the uterus was in many ways an exemplary organ for the practice of dissection. Indeed, information could not be gained about its structure and function in any other way than through direct inspection. At the close of the 15th century, in the anatomy theaters, the horridum spectaculum, as Alessandro Benedetti defined the anatomic dissection, was put on stage. From the very beginning, female cadaveric dissection confirmed that the uterus was taken as a metonymic stand for the woman's body, tota mulier in utero, as you have already seen in this image taken from Fasciculus Medicinae. In Fasciculus Medicinae, you see the central position of uterus here. In Fasciculus Medicine, there are also male figures, as you can see in the right part of the slide, but they are basically used to show the outer parts of the body. Not only metonymic, but in many early modern anatomical texts, depictions of female bodies served the sole function of illustrating the reproductive system. All other aspects of corporeality were depicted through the normative male body. And in this reproductive system, the uterus womb occupies an exceptionally important position at the expense of other female pelvic viscera. The question is, what did the anatomists observe? What did they want to see? Or even what did they touch, since in this instance, vision and touch were in fact indispensable, as Berengario da Carpi wrote in 1521. At the threshold of the early modern age, significant assumption with respect to female anatomy and physiology still influenced the observation, lectures, and texts. According to Galen legacy, the internal location of woman's genitals can be explained by an arrested development. Fully concocted genitals, the true form of genitals, are where, of course, the penis and testicles. Women remain, so to speak, half-baked. An erroneous assumption was the idea that the human uterus was bipartite, that is composed of two symmetrical cavities or ventricles, right and left, as is true in the case of some animals. And two cavities, two parties, and 7 cells, 3 on the right, 3 on the left, and 1 in the middle. The male embryos develop on the right side, the female on the left, and the middle is reserved for generation of hermaphrodites. According, the uterus, as we already saw, had 2 walls. Modern biomedicine treats the bicornuate uterus as a rare and serious medical condition. Although this is the anatomic theater of Bologna at the Archiginnasio, Archiginnasio was the site of the studium of the University of Bologna, starting from 17th century. Although the anatomists recognized a single cavity in the matrix, a fairly large number of the Renaissance anatomists still insisted on its bipartition, either by a partial wall or by a line or seam. Berengario da Carpi, Jacopo Barigazzi, was the first to state clearly that the fundus of the uterus consists of 1 cavity. His anatomy of the genitalia is quite clear, although he still considered the vagina a continuation of the uterus. In his text, Berengario is unequivocal in the statement of his belief that the uterus has a single chamber. As purum mendacium dicere, it is a pure lie to say that the uterus has 7 cavities. Indeed, Berengario used the term matrix, matrice. This statement is reiterated, but is equally dogmatic contemporary Nicola Massa, who expressed it, decepti sunt etiam, deceived are they who believe that the uterus contains several cells. Indeed, there is only 1. Berengario and his uterus illustrations are an equivocal object of fascination. His Agoge Breves is the first manuscript to present visual aids corresponding directly with the text. This panel illustrates a woman pointing to her extracted uterus, suggesting the organ must be excised from the body to be fully examined. Berengario indeed came from a family of famous surgeons, and he himself removed a prolapsed gangrenous uterus by a scalpel, he called it rasorio, and this uterus was of a certain Euphemia, the wife of Alessandro Michelis, goldsmith in Carpi. As Berengario tells us, the patient lived for many years, Euphemia lived for many years, and she was able to resume relations with her husband, although without cautional ratification. In his test, Berengario described men's and women's organs as respectively complete and outside the man, and diminished and inside the woman, with the neck of the womb like a penis. In the outer images of this illustration on the right, the woman's testicles are visible. You can see here, I don't know if I am able to show the female testicles, but the central images, the central image is labeled matrix inversa, the womb, the inverted womb, the womb inverted. The woman's testicles are no longer visible here because, following Galen, Berengario is imagining the womb turned inside out, so that they go inside it in the manner of the male ones retained in the scrotum. The dissected woman of Berengario unveils herself while standing atop a pile of books, highlighting the production of knowledge for the reader. Indeed, the woman can be known only by the doctors, only by means of dissection. This 1535 image, as well as the images of Charles Etienne, were part of a transition in which the arcane and mysterious secrets of the female body became public knowledge. Indeed, this picture suggests that the secrets of the women are only accessible when dissected in an autopsy or an anatomy textbook. The mystery of the female reproductive body is finally to be understood, unveiled. The colonization and penetration of the male gaze inside the woman's womb, which had defined woman herself as a secret, now became part of an undeniable difference. And from an internal point of view, consider internal medicine point of view, considering the emergence in early modern culture of a medicine for women, indeed of Hippocratical tradition, how it is possible to still believe that the female body is only an imperfect copy of the perfect male model? Isn't it that gynecology, or in an ample term, medicine for women, implies that the female body is different and provided with its own specificity and perfection? Indeed, still today, in the COVID pandemic era, we are still in search of gender medicine. I would like to conclude my lecture with some different, but I think inherent representation of early modern female body. Both the written text and the illustration often liken the anatomizing of reproductive organs to the casting off of one or several coats or veils before the viewer's gaze as the fugitive sheets representing human anatomy. The female fugitive sheet presents a problematic yet standard representation of female anatomy of the time. Generally speaking, the various stages of an anatomized uterus fit with other images and anatomy texts of the 16th century. As you can see again, the uterus always stands in as a metonym for woman. Her sitting position and partial nudity also present sexualized and exploitative access to knowledge through sensory. Ambroise Paré comments that women have as much hidden within the body as men have exposed outside. And the same Thomas Reynoldi in The Birth of Mankind anatomizes the body by describing in turn each investiture or clothing of the body. And indeed, the idea of the flapped or manipulable print had been used not only for naked female corpses, but also to discover underwear. This is a dress book very common in early modern Italy. And as you can see with a flap, you can see what is inside the skirt. And my last slide is a German 1520 flap sheet showing a woman spinning thread. Here, the flap forms her skirt, and it can be lifted to show a snake slithering up and emerging from between her legs. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Anna Giulia. What a wonderful, perfectissima conference. And I'm very grateful to you for also bringing your expertise in medicine to these texts that are very often so so strange to us, that we think, oh, maybe there was a problem with the Latin there, or maybe I haven't understood what was said. So it's absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
But then it's for a physician, for medicine, is I think the great difficulty in studying history is to cancel our concept of body, of medicine, of physiology. Is not so easy. It's difficult. We have a strong concept of human anatomy, and I come from a very allopathic school of medicine, that is the School of Internal Medicine in Bologna, and it is not easy to change your dress and change your mind, seeing how I think Ellen King told us how the females, our sisters in early modern, in 15th century, in 17th century, how they live the body. And indeed, it is we are not able to understand. And for us, as a doctor, I think it's a little more difficult, because we are full of knowledge, of modern biomedical knowledge, and we believe sometimes that this knowledge is the best we can have.
Yeah, and I think also that we have defined gender as a category, a construction. And so when we are not physicians, it's difficult for us too, because we think, oh, so then there is a sex. But this sex is already defined as a gender, invisible, not moving in the public, but moving inside. So this kind of inversion. And I'm very grateful to you that you commented on Berengario and the image, which is the logo of Perfecta, and the foot of this woman on the books of anatomy and medicine. Ellen King, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Anna Giulia. That was fascinating, particularly the bit about your patients and how they talk of their own bodies in using the terminology of shameful parts. I thought that was fascinating. And one thing there is, when I look at the ancient Greek texts, which use the words associated with eidos, so eidos, shame, eidoia, the shameful parts. The other thing there is that shame can also be modesty. So it's a sort of, it's difficult to know what we mean. Again, it's, you know, trying to make now and then match up, because shame doesn't necessarily mean, you know, that sort of thing. It can be modesty, as in, you know, this is private, I don't want to show this. So I found that interesting. The other thing I wanted to mention was towards the end, you used the image of the woman sitting with her legs apart. Now, I've always thought this is a sort of pornographic image, and I know that for some of the texts in this period, they reuse pornographic images and then sort of superimpose a womb or something on it. So there is definitely that link between medicine and pornography that's very interesting. But I've been at 3 conferences in the last 3 days. So one of them yesterday morning in English time had a very interesting paper by Veronique Darzen of Fribourg on images of Omphale and on gemstones, magical gemstones used to heal. She is seen sitting in that sort of pose. But in that context, the reference is not to pornography, but to birth. Mm-hmm. So the reference to the birthing chair. And that's why, you know, Veronique was arguing that's why she's shown there. It's because we're thinking about birth and the womb. And I'm just starting to think now, maybe I should be reassessing some of these images with the spread, the woman seated with the legs apart, that actually that is making us think of a birthing chair. And I just wanted to share that with you as something to think about.
Yes, Professor King, thank you. You are my main inspiration. Yes, yes. I really love all your text from Hippocrates to Hull 2 days ago. Thank you so much. And yes, for modesty, you know, here in Italy, when we study religion for our sacraments, you know, at the church, for still at my age, we have the idea that women should have modesty, should be modest. She have to look at the ground. And this is a sign of modesty, as you can see in some picture, for example, of the Mary, La Madonna in Italy. This from one side, and the other side is pornography. Indeed, Giulio Romano in Italy at the same period was the inspiration of some engraved picture, very at the same position as the Berengario women, but they have a dindle in the hand. If you want, I can send you this picture. It's very disturbing, but it's in some way a connection with this maybe pornographic gaze, pornographic eye of the male. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to add something on behalf of Sarah Petrella, who couldn't make it today, but who sent me references to the so-called in French chaises de parturiente, and I've put them in Regarder la profondeur on the exhibit, on the expositions pages. And you see these chairs without a seat are actually meant for birth. They were like our étrier now in France, and that's the allusion. The second thing is I've put with them the women with from Etienne with showing her genitals sitting on a chair, and the comment from Etienne, which is, do not think it's dishonest, do not think it's pornography, which is very interesting, because if you say, do not think it's pornography, well, that is then. So that, and it's a very violent pornography, very often. So that's interesting. I just wanted to mention Sarah Petrella,
Yes.
who works on that. And
Helen, the same chair with the same form was also used for fumigation.
yeah,
Yeah, was a similar chair for birth, but also to place the womb in this own place. Yes.
yeah, that's very interesting how reproduction authorizes the image. Isabelle Giraud, Sarah is there. So first Isabelle and then Sarah. Sorry, I didn't see you, Sarah. Isabelle.
Oui,
Oui.
je voulais juste rebondir sur la notion de honte. En tant que médecin français, je voulais juste vous dire que dans l'anatomie française, dans le pelvis, il y a un nerf que l'on appelle nerf honteux, toujours aujourd'hui. Et tout cela, on l'accepte. En tant qu'étudiant, ça nous a peut-être fait rire un peu. On ne s'est jamais rebellé en tant que femme étudiante française. Et je rebondis sur ce qui a été dit tout à l'heure. En effet, quand on est formaté en tant que médecin, qu'on nous a appris énormément de choses, ça n'est pas toujours facile de changer notre regard. C'est peut-être encore plus difficile quand on est médecin. Voilà.
Merci les deux médecins dans la salle d'être là. Et merci aussi de ce retour. Kim Daly et Lenora Marcellus, qui sont professeurs dans la section nursing à l'Université de Victoria, parleront et écriront pour ce colloque de pathologizing perfecta, c'est-à-dire l'idée que la présentation qui a été faite pendant leurs études et qu'on fait aux femmes qui vont accoucher de leurs organes génitaux est que ces organes sont problématiques, que c'est ce qui va causer le problème pendant la naissance. Et Kim Daly parlera de la gêne des femmes qui ne sont plus des jeunes filles et qui sont autour de la ménopause à laisser voir leurs organes génitaux parce qu'elles ont l'impression qu'ils doivent être corrigés. Et donc, il y a dans le monde dans lequel je vis, autour de Victoria, des entreprises chirurgicales très lucratives pour corriger les lèvres des femmes après la ménopause, la labioplastie. Je ne savais pas qu'on pouvait faire ça. Je savais qu'on faisait des mutilations du clitoris et des lèvres au Moyen-Âge et à la Renaissance, mais je n'avais aucune idée que ça avait continué dans le monde moderne et que des médecins avec des diplômes de médecine pouvaient exercer ce type de pratique. Je ne veux pas parler trop longtemps. Merci d'être là. Anna Julia, tu veux répondre?
No, moi non plus. I don't know anything about this kind of intervention, but in any case, also in the past, la vetula, the old woman, and the genitalia of old woman deserve an observation apart because it's another chapter of medicine of women. The smell of genitalia of old women, for example, old women like a witch, and because her sex, and this is very interesting.
Et la terrible violence que nous rappelle Patricia, des mutilations pour enlever ce qui serait en trop chez les femmes et ce qui serait non contrôlé. Sarah.
Voilà. Merci Hélène. Alors, je me suis perdue avec les langues. Je vais continuer en français. Merci beaucoup Anna Giulia Gramenzi pour cette merveilleuse présentation qui était riche d'images, certaines connues et d'autres moins. C'est ce qui était génial, c'est que vous nous avez amené beaucoup de matériel. Et j'ai une question à vous poser, une petite remarque. Donc, sur la pornographie, c'est très exact, hein, il y a des excellents articles qui ont été écrits, et Hélène d'ailleurs aussi a écrit avec Carlina un bel article sur les reprises de Giulio Romano chez Da Carpi, mais aussi chez Charles Estienne. Mais je voulais juste préciser un peu, parce que quand on utilise le mot pornographie, on pense aujourd'hui à la pornographie, alors que là, il s'agit d'images mythologiques. Et c'est important parce que sinon, on impose aux images anciennes une dichotomie entre, comme on a dit beaucoup au 19e, la sainte et la putain, qui, à mon avis, n'existe pas dans l'iconographie moderne, au moins anatomique. On ne pourrait même pas parler, je pense, de pornographie dans le cas de Giulio Romano. C'est de la mythologie, c'est-à-dire c'était un genre, même iconographique, qui autorisait la licence, mais qui était parfaitement accepté. Et je ne pense pas qu'il faille y voir une opposition. Mais bon, ça, ce n'était pas ma question. Ma question, c'était pour les métaphores, parce que vous nous avez montré cette très belle gravure de Spiegel, et vous avez parlé des métaphores du jardin, pour parler de l'utérus. Et c'est très égoïste comme question, mais j'étudie pour ma conférence, je vais travailler sur les métaphores visuelles du jardin. Alors, je voulais, si vous avez d'autres pistes dans les textes de comparaison entre l'utérus et le jardin, ou les végétaux en général.
Johannes Veslingus, I will send you something.
Ah oui, thank you. Yes.
Indeed, he was a botanical,
was
a doctor, but also a botanical in Padua. And but if you want, we can share this picture. Indeed, Veslingus has no pictures, but as a text, and maybe it's interesting for you. I think, and it's very interesting the link between pornography and medicine. For example, in Venice, Venice was a very special land, for a very special country for Italy, because in Venice sex was really free from the church opposition. So it's a culture where we can go more deeply into this link between erotism and medicine. And in some way, Marinello and his daughter, they are in this atmosphere.
Merci. Merci Anna Giulia. Oui, c'est une question fascinante. Aussi parce que ça reprend aussi la figuration du corps de la femme comme un champ qu'on ensemence chez Aristote. Mais je ne veux pas parler trop longtemps. Patricia Carafi avait levé la main et elle a une question. Voilà.
Oui, je suis là. Merci d'abord. Merci Hélène de cette magnifique série de conférences. J'ai raté les premières à cause de la didactique infernale, mais je pense récupérer. Et merci Anna Giulia, je te connais depuis longtemps et je connais tes recherches, mais là vraiment, tu nous as vraiment offert une conférence magnifique. Il y a une chose qui m'a beaucoup impressionnée. D'abord, là, l'image sur la femme jardin, sur l'utérus jardin, et puis l'image de Ambroise Paré, où il y a l'utérus imaginé comme un animal qui est en fait un serpent. Et puis, la dernière image du serpent que tu as montré, superbe. Alors, je voulais donner une observation qui est peut-être un peu qui relie la modernité avec le Moyen-Âge. Parce que là, vous avez le jardin Courtois, et dans le jardin Courtois, le centre est une dame à côté d'un arbre, sous un arbre à côté de la fontaine. Et là, c'est toute la littérature du Moyen-Âge. Mais cette femme, parfois, est représentée comme une serpente. Mélusine, par exemple, qui est maudite comme une serpente au féminin. Et puis, vous avez le corps féminin qui en soi-même c'est pas de la pornographie, c'est la pensée du Moyen-Âge des théologues et des moralistes qui affirment que la femme, en tant que femme, est une serpente. Donc, c'est le speculum, la représentation, si vous allez voir la représentation d'Ève dans le jardin, dans plusieurs miniatures ou peintures jusqu'au XVe siècle, représente et Michel-Ange, par exemple, la femme et les serpents qui ont le même visage. Les serpents ont le visage de femme, parfois habillés comme Ève ou avec la même coiffure ou les mêmes cheveux. Et tout ça, je crois que c'est bien, ça fait partie d'un imaginaire de longue durée qui est convaincu et qui revient à travers le catholicisme, à travers la religion, qui ressort et qui est toujours convaincu du rapport entre la femme et le poison. La femme et la luxure. Donc, je ne sais pas si ces images d'accouchement, on peut parler de la pornographie, mais tu l'as démontré très très bien, que l'intériorité, c'était ce que les théologues disaient et écrivaient au Moyen-Âge, l'intériorité de la femme est poison, tandis que l'extériorité peut être beauté resplendissante. Voilà. Je ne sais pas, Anna Giulia, si tu es d'accord.
Yes, I speak in English. I don't know. I'm mixing all the language, but it's okay. Yes, we already discussed this point together many times. I fully agree with you. I have to underline that this picture of Paré is not a uterus, indeed. Is a snake inside is a sort of worm, but also worms are in the image of women. Sometimes in the uterus there are some corpses, and these things were interpreted as worms, for example. But I think there are two different things. The first is the connection between woman and poison and snakes and luxuria, and I agree that in many contexts, also in the anatomic picture or in the anatomic description, this is something that come back many times. Indeed, something is changing in some field of medicine, especially when we make a distinction between the anatomist, so the description of anatomy, and the care of women. Indeed, doctors such as Marinello, Liebold, some are really moved by a genuine desire to treat women, and they consider women as different and not as a luxurious creature. I don't know if I answer, Patrizia.
Merci. Merci et merci Patricia de cette question qui rappelle comment la beauté de la femme se paie par la laideur qu'elle cache. Hein. Donc cette beauté est toujours trompeuse, elle est la porte de l'enfer. Merci aussi de ta présence, Patricia, puisqu'à travers Patricia Carafi, c'est Christine de Pisan qui est avec nous. Et nous avons eu donc les 3 conférences comme les 3 allégories qui guident l'édification de la Cité des Dames. Donc Hélène King, Jacqueline Vrons et Anna Giulia Gramenzi comme raison, droiture et justice. Parfait. Victoria von Hoffmann.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Thank you so much for a very rich talk. I have a question which is not without connection with the first remark that Patricia just made about the womb as an animal. I was fascinated about what you said about the womb being described as an active organ, as something with powerful sensitive faculties. So you talked about complexions, and so I know that each organ's had a specific complexion and that could vary for a variety of reasons, but the idea of an organ that is sensitively so powerful and that is described not passively but as an active organ, I found that was really very, very interesting. And I was wondering, can you confirm that the womb is the only organ that is described as such, or is it something that you can find for the brain or for the heart, for instance?
Indeed, I think that from the very beginning, the womb was the only organ to have this peculiar, this particular characteristic to move, to wander. Even when fixed, the womb moved around the body. And if you know, hysteria is a pathology and is the clinical sign of this wandering womb. Is the
yes, I know that the womb. I knew that the womb moves, but what I didn't know is that the womb can feel and is active. Really, yes, in that sense.
And indeed, this were studies made during 17th and 18th century, when electricity, sensitivity, magnetism came into medicine, no? Thanks to the scientific progress. I don't know how to translate in English mesmerism. Mesmerism was a sort of quality of body to attract each other, and was also present in Mozart, for example, this attractivity of bodies. And in this period, a strong connection with brain and womb was made, and there was a theory stating that both organs as the made consistence was made of the same matter, and as the same sensitivity as you told. And these are very, very interesting study about this. And you know, the joke that we actually think with the uterus is something that it's used for us. Okay.
Thank you.
Elena, I read something about the fumigation, and I don't know, I remember that an actress, maybe Gwyneth Paltrow, used the fumigation for the beauty of her vagina. I don't know if you have read this
Well, I know that she sells a line of beauty products with their own vagina scent.
That's correct. They're supposed to smell like her vagina.
Yes, smell, really.
But yeah,
aromatherapy.
In a way, I wrote something about Gwyneth Paltrow and ancient fumigation, so I'll put the link in the chat so everyone can see it.
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and for the idea of fumigations too, I think that, well, Hélène, you could talk about how to attract the womb. So the womb goes up for an ailment called the suffocation of the mother, or suffocation of the matrix. And I think that Victoria and everyone would love to hear what to do.
It's a very short version. Yeah, you basically, if your womb moves up your body, then you put at the nose foul smells to push the womb down. If your womb moves out of the body, you put sweet smells at the nose to pull the womb up again. So basically, it's a sort of one-way system, but you can make it move with scent. So yeah, that's how scent therapy works, short version. So it assumes that the woman is a hollow tube with a mouth at both ends. And of course, in the talks we've heard in the last few days, the idea of the mouth, the lips, the neck, the top and the bottom is being repeated. And some really interesting examples, which I haven't heard before, have come up in the papers so far. So is that a reasonable summary?
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah.
There are some recipes that look absolutely delicious with honey, cinnamon, vanilla, and so on. But also there is the full smell to bring it down.
Yes.
And that is something that is akin to the salts when women who couldn't breathe because of the corsets were fainting.
Yeah.
And then they have to smell something. And
Yes.
I was surprised to see that the new aromatherapy is actually going back to, oh, you feel nauseous, smell that, as this fumigation and scent therapy was.
Yes, yes, it's very interesting, isn't it? So I think the sorts of things you were smelling there are very sort of medicinal, strong smells, which will somehow bring you back when you start to faint, which is sort of different from moving the womb up and down, but
Yeah, but it's close to it.
Yeah, it is close to it. It is close to it. I quite agree.
Yeah, thank you. I see that Tatiana Clavier, who is working on the Querelle des Femmes, the rhetorics, but also many other things, is raising her hand.
Oui, bonsoir, bonjour. Merci Anna Giulia pour cette conférence fascinante, vivifiante, vraiment. Ma question porte sur ces fumigations dont vous parlez. J'ai trouvé dans des textes misogynes des références à des recettes aphrodisiaques de femmes qui mettaient dans leur vulve, dans leur vagin, des plantes. Et comme évidemment, je cherche à déconstruire ces propos misogynes, je me suis demandé si ces auteurs ne parlaient pas en fait de fumigation et de recettes pour soigner, de recettes curatives. Alors, il s'agit de civettes, de chypre et de musc. Est-ce qu'il s'agirait de recettes aphrodisiaques ou voilà, je me pose la question. Est-ce curatif?
I really don't know.
Si je peux, moi j'ai trouvé je les ai rencontrés, ces ingrédients et ces plantes, et ce sont des plantes abortives.
D'accord.
Elles sont dans la trotula.
Voilà.
Mais il y a aussi des plantes aphrodisiaques pour sentir bon. Parce qu'il y a toute cette histoire du corps qui sent les tombes, qui sent la corruption, la putréfaction. Et donc, il y a aussi usage alors de camomille, de rose, de pétales de rose, mais c'est un peu astringent, etc., qui sont donc des usages recommandés pour que le sexe sente bon et ne détourne pas l'homme.
D'accord. Parce que là, clairement, cet auteur dit qu'il s'agit que cela donne de la chaleur et grand appétit. Donc, c'est clairement aphrodisiaque. Donc, non, a priori, ça n'a rien à voir avec les herbes dont vous parliez pour les fumigations.
I don't know, but in any case, this kind of treatment was very, very old since the Egyptian and Greek to put something inside to treat some disease, or to put the womb at its own place, or as a contraception. And I think that it's possible that was also for aphrodisiac properties of some herbs, why not? But I never read about this thing, never. But I don't know.
Merci beaucoup.
But it's very, very interesting to connect this this kind of fumigation also with different type of care or different. Sorry for the word. The characteristic of female genitalia, reproduction and sex and contraception, abortion, and this is very, very complex.
Le musc est une odeur qui est normalement réservée, un parfum qui est pour les hommes à cause de ses dangers pour la grossesse.
Interesting.
Ouais. Enfin, j'en sais rien, hein, parce que moi, je parle de texte, hein, je ne suis pas médecin. Je ne suis pas médecin. Pascal Chiron a levé la main. Alors,
Oui,
merci
bonjour.
Tatiana.
Bonjour, bonsoir. Merci beaucoup pour toute cette conférence et ces échanges très stimulants. Ma question, elle porte sur le froid et le chaud, parce que on décrit donc dans les textes l'humeur froide de la femme et en même temps, elle est décrite comme un brasier, comme voilà, comme étant pleine de chaleur. Alors, comme je suis vraiment ignorante de cette médecine du XVIe siècle, par exemple, je voulais savoir comment relier cette représentation d'une femme donc avec une humeur froide et ce brasier, cette chaleur dont elle fait preuve. Merci.
I think that uterus, as I told, has no complexion. I don't know if Professor King agree with me that uterus has not temperament, has not a complexion, because its complexion varies with the different moment of the life. It can, but for early modern doctors, woman was without hat, was cold indeed, and this brasier, this chaleur, this hot, maybe is related to this capacity to have animalistic characteristic, to be zoomorphic in some way. I don't know if Professor King has some comment on this point.
You know far more than I do, Anna Julia, about the role of complexion here. All I would say is that in the ancient texts, which these people are reading, the woman is cold, but the womb can be hot. So that, I think that's where the paradox comes from. It's the womb is hot, but the woman is cold. And the womb has to be hot in order to sort of cook the baby, to cook the blood to make the baby. So that's where it doesn't quite match. You know, there's not a sort of simple, consistent line here. There is a paradox. That's the way it is.
And life is heat. La vie, c'est la chaleur. Donc, quand on est mort, on est froid. Donc, une femme qui serait totalement froide n'existerait plus et ne pourrait pas se reproduire. Isabelle, est-ce que tu as une autre question?
Oui.
Ah oui, pardon. Donc, je ne savais pas si la main était restée par erreur ou non. Pardon.
Un certain temps, puis j'ai compris. Et là, je l'ai relevé.
Merci, Pascal, de cette belle question. Perfecta s'intéresse de très près à ce qu'on a appelé les paradoxes de la perfection avec Patricia Carafi et Mercedes Arriaga. Et nous réunissons un recueil sur ces paradoxes sur les femmes. Parce que c'est la manière de les définir, en fait, au XVIe siècle. Isabelle, je te passe la parole.
Merci. À propos de chaleur, je me pose la question, sait-on comment ces hommes de l'Antiquité, puis après du XVIe siècle, mesuraient ou sur quels critères se basait-il pour ça dire qu'un organe ou un être humain était froid ou chaud? Puisque j'ai été frappée dans une des conférences précédentes d'entendre que les organes génitaux de l'homme étaient vus comme chauds et la femme était froide, alors qu'en fait, en pratique, les organes génitaux de l'homme sont à l'extérieur, comme on le sait. Les testicules sont dans les bourses. Je suis désolée, je suis très
Non, mais
terre à terre.
c'est génial.
Et pour que les testicules produisent des spermatozoïdes, ils ont besoin d'une température inférieure à 37 degrés. Je n'ai plus en tête la température exacte, mais je crois que c'est 35 degrés 5 ou quelque chose comme ça. Et d'ailleurs, on sait que les pantalons un peu serrés augmentent la température des bourses et altèrent la formation des spermatozoïdes chez nous au XXe siècle, au XXIe siècle. Bref, sur quels critères ces médecins anciens parlaient-ils de froid ou de chaud pour un organe, pour un être humain?
You know, so this is the difficulty to understand the old medicine for me and you. We are doctors, and sometimes the philosophical, epistemological questions are such a mystery. I was astonished in Middle Age and Renaissance. The diet for the medical dietology was completely based on this classification on cold and hot, and was some really crazy was the degree, because each cold and hot and wet and dry had some complex degree, 100 of degrees, and for me is crazy to understand. I need a historian or philosophical course. I'm not able to understand completely, really. Also for me, the testicles are outside because spermatozoids need to have a low temperature, and I know this, and it's crazy. But I think Professor King can answer.
I think this is where I get to answer. Okay, I think it's just that nobody measures. There's no way of measuring. Nobody measures. It's a model. Hot is good, cold is bad. Therefore, men are hot, women are cold. And as Hélène said, hot is alive, cold is dead. So obvious, really. So nobody measures, but, you know, they don't care. Same thing with food and with diet. You know, they say this food is hot, this food is cold. It doesn't mean it's actually hot. It doesn't even mean it's spicy. It just fits in with, you know, their view of the world. You know, you can't sort of try and match it up too closely. It doesn't work.
Measure medicine is a scientific medicine, you know, is something very recent. To measure something, to quantify a characteristic is something very contemporary.
I think that it helps to be a literary person and to look at these texts as literature, because it works very well. It's a system. It's full of symbols, and it's full of dogmas everywhere. So you need to be inside to understand it and play with the parts. And the categories make up representations. So that works very nicely. And when we talk from it, from outside about it, it looks absolutely stupid and silly. But actually, when you're inside, it's so well organized that it makes sense that, for instance, if you're a little melancholic and you like to read your books, don't wear black, because that will push you even lower. Or if you're hungry and you don't have, you're poor, and I'm not joking, that's a treatise by Marsilio Ficino and by Dubois. Well, you can be fed by the smell of roasting chickens. So why do you say that you're hungry when you could stand in front of the stalls in the market and be fed by the smell. So, and that works. On the paper, that works so well. So
yes, I stop asking at some point of my study. I stop asking because in terms of scientific medicine, it is impossible. It is a different way to conceive the world.
Thank you. And Isabel, if you have another question, then you raise
Merci.
again. Yeah, and I see that Victoria has another question.
It's not a question, actually. It's a comment following up on this discussion, because I may have a tentative answer. So I'm not sure about what I'm saying, because it's the research that I'm currently doing right now. So I'm working on complexions in the Renaissance and in relation to touch. And so I'm trying to make sense of all these theories, because these theories of complexion, they're extremely complicated. They come from classical works and especially Galenic works, and then they're transformed in the Renaissance. So it's a big mess. And I'm trying to make sense of it. So I'm working on the De Complexionibus from Galen and its reception in Renaissance treatises. And so what I can say is that there's the theory that's quite clear in Galen. When you read the De Complexionibus, it's each person has a certain temperament, and you have nine forms of complexions, 1 perfect and then 8 unperfect that are different balanced forms of complexions. And so according to Galen, the way to determine the complexion is to use the hand, the skin that is on the palm of the hand, which is supposed to be the most temperate part of the whole body. And because that's the most temperate part of the body, and the human is considered as the most temperate creature, so that's the way that you can determine complexion. But it does not work. It does not always work that easily, because he says that each person can have a varied complexion when you're sick, when you grow old, and each organ has a specific complexion. So you have to use the senses in addition to reason and to experience, and try to figure that out. And so it's extremely complicated. And what I'm trying to do at the moment is trying to work on these theories and on these practices, and try to see how they intersect, and if people were actually touching bodies to determine the complexion of their patients. So they were touching their patients. We know that they were determining the complexion of the patients before performing a diagnosis. We know that they had these theories, they were learning them in schools, and so but we don't really know if it was by touching them that they knew what the complexion was. So
thank you so much. Thank you.
Weren't they looking at the color of the urine and the eye and the skin? But what I was going to say is that the question of the complexion is the question for the doctors, for the physicians. The people who touch the body are usually barbers and surgeons, and they touch parts of the body. So this is that makes it even more complicated. That's a wonderful topic you're working on, Victoria. I don't envy you though, because it's going to be so difficult. It's 10:30. Do we say a huge thank you to all speakers and to you, wonderful audience? I'm very grateful for your presence. This morning with Vanessa, who's still there, we were saying that we were asked on the CBC radio, what is the impact of your conference? Well, we had rehearsed, that was a good thing. Et c'était en français. And I said, well, that would be the respect for the perfection of each human body. I mean, it's not so much about female or not female bodies. It's about all bodies. And so thank you for being there, and thank you for attending, making this event.